Welcome back to Healthy Planet, Healthy Me. I'm Sherry Beal. And this segment, we're joined by two ladies. Marcia Hanscom, she is the co-director of the Ballona Institute, which is a project of the International Humanities Center. Ballona is spelled Ballona, and that's in the Playa del Rey area here in Southern California. We're also joined with Susan Suntree. She's on the advisory board of the Ballona Institute and is a poet, performer, and environmental activist. Her one-woman performance and forthcoming book by University of Nebraska Press is titled Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California, and it explores the prehistory and sacred geography of Los Angeles and is also one of the projects sponsored by the Ballona Institute. Susan Suntree is going to tell us today a little bit about a Native American graves that were found in the Ballona area. I think over 500 Native American graves that were found there, so stay tuned. We'll hear about that. First, we're going to go to Marcia Hanscom, the co-director of the Ballona Institute, and I would like to welcome you to Healthy Planet, Healthy Me.
Thanks, Sherry.
Now, tell us, Marcia, for those, and there are some who have barely or maybe even not at all heard of the Ballona wetlands. So I want you to give us a little bit of background. Where are these wetlands located, and tell us a little bit about the history.
Well, Ballona is a valley that's sort of nestled in between Los Angeles International Airport and the highlands that go into Santa Monica. And the Ballona wetlands were formed as a result of the Los Angeles River that for many thousands of years flowed in that direction and met up with several streams and Santa Monica Bay. And all of this was a large confluence that made a big floodplain. And as late as after the mid-'60s, we only had about 1,000 acres remaining of wetlands after many changes, including Marina del Rey being built, including Ballona Creek being channelized, and including the Los Angeles River being redirected toward Long Beach.
Do you have any idea when it started out about how many acres or miles were in the made up the Ballona wetlands?
There were more than 2,500 acres of wetlands themselves and another several thousand acres of marshlands inland, like La Cienega. La Cienega means the swamp in Spanish.
Oh.
And lots of prairie grasslands surrounding this area. And what we have now is sort of a little microcosm of what was. Those grasslands are really still very important to the functioning wetlands that are remaining. And so we have a little ecosystem and sufficient enough that we have some endangered and rare species right here on the coast of Los Angeles.
Is the reason that we lost the acres that we have lost solely because of development?
Development, but prior to development, there was a lot of oil drilling, and then a lot of the wetlands were drained for cattle grazing, and so a lot of the soil and vegetation got changed significantly because of that. So it was really a mistake and non-understanding of how important coastal wetlands are for many different reasons.
Okay, and I want you to tell us some of those reasons, the importance of the wetlands and their purpose.
Well, coastal wetlands, as we learned during the Katrina disaster in New Orleans, they can coastal wetlands are a very important thing to help to minimize flood damage, to be a buffer from storm areas. They also sort of soak up floodwaters like a sponge. They have special soils and plant life that have evolved over many years that make them a different kind of system for the waters that come downstream and come offshore during storms. They also are very important for cleansing pollutants coming downstream before those waters from the watershed get into our beach areas. And they are also a very important area for migrating bird species because of the tremendous amount of insect life.
I want you to tell me how many acres were there before the campaign or struggle, and how many were saved.
Well, there were 1,087 acres when we started our Ballona Coalition in 1995. We did not feel that the deal that had been made with previous groups for saving 200 acres was sufficient. So we said we want to save the rest of it. And in 2003, we were able to get more than 600 acres of land preserved, which is what we're celebrating right now, that we were able to do that. There's more, however, that hasn't been built on. Some of that 1,087 acres has been built on. There's more than 100 acres remaining in the Playa Vista tract that is at question what will happen with. There are also about 50 or 60 acres of small parcels surrounding the Ballona wetlands owned by different landowners, all threatened by development, and that we are hoping to complete the park. We want to complete the Ballona Wetlands State Park.
We have Susan Suntree here, and she is on the advisory board of the Ballona Institute and a poet, performer, and environmental activist. And she has a forthcoming book that's titled Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California, which sounds like a whole show in itself. I'd love to hear more about that. But please tell us what about the grave sites that were found of the Native American Indians there at Ballona.
First of all, and to understand the importance of the cemetery that was unfortunately dug up by Playa Vista when they wanted to put a drainage ditch to drain their streets and were unwilling to relocate it, which of course led to a lawsuit and so forth that we're still struggling with. Now, let me back up and say, this is not the only cemetery grave sites that have been found in the Ballona Valley. When the development, if you look at the development along the bluffs, there have been several indigenous residential sites and grave sites found along those bluffs and in the Ballona wetlands proper. And what we need to understand is that because people have lived there for so long, they actually lived there as the water level changed from the end of the previous ice age, which was between 12 and 7,000 years ago. The coastline changed dramatically as the water level rose as the ice melted. And so the people lived in various locations over the thousands of years, on the bluffs, areas that are now wet were once dry, are now wet. And so there will be more
and more continuing to change.
Yes, and
there will be more.
There will be more bodies discovered, more burial sites.
Okay. Well, maybe next time you come on the show, you can read one of your poems.
I'd love to.
And you do a one-woman show, so we want to hear about that when that's coming up. I'd like to thank all of our guests for today's show, and certainly to you, our beloved listeners. See you next week, 2 p.m. Healthy Planet, Healthy Me. Have a great weekend.